Hello, welcome back to BLENDERSUSHI Live Noding. In this episode, we're gonna continue with the previous concept. So you know that you can deal with multiple data and just stuff it into nodes, and then you get a multiple result. We're gonna do the same thing, but this time we're gonna turn and make this kind of animation. So you have, let's have a look how you can create something like this. It looks like a clouds or waving, moving side by side. But what is this exactly? If we look at the nodes, it's it's looking a little bit complex, but it's actually still fairly simple. You just need to basically look at the one on the top right here and how the matrix um, kind of doing the duplications up here. What we have is just basically lines, but the line has been kind of flipped into its V directions. Originally it's just like this, and if I reduce the line, we get, just a 3 points lines, and it's kind of doing this swivel. It's a sine wave, and then it's doing the rotations. It's not rotation, I mean the like a sine wave in the angle. We can even perhaps do a little bit more on this, maybe kind of offset the rotations. I kind of like these guys. I can call it like a kind of like a hip motion, doing this kind of loop. But each one of them is slightly offset, so it's looking much more interesting. A little bit like a snake. Anyway, let's get started. Yeah, from scratch. File, save as. It's gonna be multiple animation offset. Switch to compositing, virtual, new. Sometimes it's not very clear where we should plug in like nodes that carry multiple data, but it's part of the way you work in nodes. Sometimes you just test it out. We know that the idea is we have like a multiple line, so we start with that first line, viewer draw, and then plug that in. I'm gonna close Safari so it's a bit faster. So by default, lines looking like this. It's kind of growing in x positive axis. Now that's not what we want. It's always a good idea if you want to do some kind of duplications. You like to kind of center the object's position, depend on what you're doing. But of course, in this case, we want it to be center. We can do that using something called vector drop. I believe there's also center polygons, which probably better. If I'll try matrix. Plug this guy in. Oh, so yeah, that's this guy centering it. It doesn't. The funny thing is, it doesn't like less than 3 vertices, so that's okay, I guess. Keep it 3 vertices for now. I think center polygons can do that as well. Let's see. So center polygons, plug that in. Do not separate. There's the origin and there's the center. Maybe apply matrix this and that. No, it doesn't like that. Matrix in. maybe. Okay, center polygons work on polygons, not on lines. So, well, I think vector drop does it perfectly for us, so don't worry about that. The next thing we want to do is matrix in for the duplications. You can, of course, do the duplication on the top or the bottom, depend on whether you want to work directly on the lines itself, on the vector of each lines, or on the transform level. Let's do it on the transform level. Let's say for the location, you can use another line like that, and then you can, start pushing the position of these lines. Let's say if you are okay, you have 10 duplication here, and then you use vector math and let's see, vector in, kind of doing it in the y axis, kind of doing that side by side motion. See, this is a single value adding to the line, which is 10 values. If you want to kind of have like a offset, you need to plug in like 10 different numbers, 10 different values here. Let's say we are using something like frame, and then with a sine of this frame, you're gonna get that kind of motion, sine wave motion. But that's a little bit too fast, so you plug in multiplier and then give it smaller value. See, we're already getting somewhere. If you want to offset, you want to have like a 10 different offset that's slightly different, you just use a range float. And here you want to use addition, subdivision, addition, just this guy. Just plug this guy in there. Now we have slightly offset kind of motion, because you know that originally there's only a single stream of frame numbers data, but once you plug in this kind of multiple data, you get multiple frame number, slightly offset. So the offset is dependent on this start and stop and the count. The count is of course 10 because we have like 10 different copies, but the offset you can adjust it here. Maybe step is also good. So how many offset you want per copy. Okay, that's we are getting somewhere. Remember that all the value here, 10, 10. This one for the line itself slightly different, but keep eyes on this number, because if you want to increase this, I make it 15, you see, in order for it to work predictably, so we need to increase this to 15 as well. Okay, now we have something that's looking like a snakes or centipede. Maybe we want to do something with the rotations. Let's do that real quick. we can just use this transform. Rotation and angle. That's the spectral default. For the rotations, it's gonna be the y-axis. Actually, y or x-axis. So just use this guy. Into the rotations, and the angle just do it like that. See, one stream of data controlling the angle, but we can say kind of control it using another sine wave. Let's try that. Let's do it slightly different. So with angle, we can have more control with the mapping, because sine, we know that sine wave goes from -1 to 1, and we want new value, maybe -60 to 60 in the degree angle. Plug that in. So now we have something that looks like kind of skating side by side. We can have perhaps a different type of motion here, like faster. Let's see what happened here. Maybe this one can be faster, this one can be slower. And the offset, keep the offset the same, but we can also offset the time. If we know that this guy this is kind of the same, right? For the angle and the side-by-side motion is kind of the same, but we can offset the time slightly if we use another add just before this guy. So we are offsetting everything as a whole. So now we have this kind of motion. We can actually put some kind of random number here. Random number, size of 10, plug that in. Add some kind of randomness here. Random seed. Now they're slightly more natural. Check the randomness using the stethoscope. See, 18, 19, 19, 19. Let's try 30 different random number. Now each one have slightly different motion. This is a good thing, and it's very natural. Of course, we can always go up there and come back to the line and then increase the line, the length of the lines, Maybe change the angle, or let's see. Oh yeah, that's very strange. Save this, and because this is virtual, and I think these guys are not just normal. They're not just instants. They're actually like a real lines. We can kind of connect all of them together. So if we use matrix apply, that guy, and then we use like UV connection. Like that. We can change the directions. Oops. Actually the UV, if we didn't slice it, no, this is a surface. Maybe the rotation is too strong. Make it -30 and 30. Something like that. Here with the line, we can actually replace it with our own vector in, and let me think. Line is let's say for range float here, count of 15, plug into the X, because the line is going in X. So by doing this, we have more control over the start and the stop. Increase or decrease the number. Maybe increase it to like 30, and then so this also need to be 30, and the random number need to be 30 as well. So for all this, the number that's responsible for the number of copies, we can just use a single integer value to control all of them. Including this guy. And start and step, this is for the offset. Cool, then we can also change the directions of how it's gonna connect. Say we want it in the V direction, so we have this look. We have control over the steppings, so yeah, at this point, really, it's totally up to you where you want to take it further. Still kind of basic, really, but you can tweak it further and then change the function, maybe. Yeah, sometimes it gets to the point where, oh, okay, it becomes really complex, and then you don't know what to do with it anymore. But of course, just keep a lot of different version of the same file and kind of look at the progressions. In fact, it's a good idea if you just do if you're doing this kind of thing yourself, do a recording, and then it's always interesting to go back and then see how the team kind of building from the scratch into this kind of design. In fact, this one is probably different from what I did earlier. Slightly more random. Look at but of course you can do a little bit more, like let's see, back to this guy. maybe you can add a randomized input vertices here. This guy's gonna be the same for each line, but you can also provide different seed if I'm not wrong. So integer range, how many is this? 10? Maybe just plug that in. Now here, if I plug in like how many is this? 30? Okay, 30. So we have like a 30 different variations. You see the edges doesn't work anymore because we need to do the kind of repeat on the edges as well. Repeat 30 times. Now we get it. In fact, it's a good idea to keep the number the same. Once we are kind of mixing and stuffing a lot of multiple of data into vertices, edges, and metrics, remember that Spreadshot try to keep the list makes sense for them for it to draw the result. Sometimes you don't have the same number and then it's complaining. So yeah, that's a random lines doing its thing. I'm pretty sure it can be further randomized, like in these directions. So apart from here, we are just kind of pushing the x-axis. Maybe we want to also do something with the y-axis, but that's gonna be like can be super complicated. Actually, maybe add a vector noise somewhere here. Noise vector. I don't know, they look slightly like a thunderbolt, but very static. Yeah, I guess I can further continue with this. But anyway, this is yeah, pretty much the idea. You can pipe in like once you have this frame with ads and multiple values, you will have multiple time frames that you can plug in and generate something like an offset of animations. Even though this is just still basics, just working on the transform of each lines, which is now pretty much random for each lines. But yeah, you can easily get interesting result. Something like that. Okay, that's pretty much it for this live coding. If you have any question, feedback, you can leave it down below. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you in the next video.